Holy crap balls of Alcatraz, I love this game! Little late to the party, but damn, it pays to be a patient gamer, y'all. Jarek Defiler, the patient gamer, here to graciously praise the hell out of the absolute powerhouse that is Palworld. Made by a small indie team, warred with a gaming giant, shame on Nintendo by the way, stuck to their guns and just focused on making a fun game. Palworld is everything I want in a woman. Voluptuous with them curves, intelligently presentable, cheery and colorful but still with a bit of darkness in her, and of course, overall sexy and beautiful. Yes. That's right, my gaming friends, Palworld has it all. Granted, it's not perfect, but what is? It's fun, entertaining, addictive, and at the end of the day, just a real game. No 5-hour cutscenes, no Hollywood actors nobody cares about.
What the hell is even that?
No capitulation to modern socio-political Western agendas, or any agendas for that matter. Nope, Palworld is a prime example of what AAA gaming used to be, and why indie gaming is dominating and also the future of our beloved, albeit sickly, gaming industry. So join me, Jarek Defiler, as I take a deep dive into what I consider to be the best game I've played this year. Palworld! Howdy ho, neighbors. Boy, oh boy, I'm excited to share my thoughts on this one with you guys. Palworld, woo! I've had Palworld on my wishlist for over 2 years, ever since it entered early access on Steam back in January of 2024. Developed and published by Japanese studio Pocketpair, long may they reign, Palworld is completely taking over the market right now, and for good reason. It's phenomenal. No beating around the bush here. But before we get into it, be sure to like the video, subscribe if you'd be so kind, and share it with your other gaming pals, as it really helps out the channel. Thank you kindly. Now, I've been waiting a long time to dip into Palworld, and I'm glad I did, as the recent 1.0 release has wrapped up the game nicely by implementing over 72 new pals, as well as the in-game biomes such as the World Tree and Sunreach, a floating sky island, which is awesome. They also added a ton of other features like watchtowers that reveal the surrounding areas and act as fast travel points, several small islands, ancient ruins, player level cap of 80 from 65, and much, much more, yeah. Needless to say, this is not a simple little update. 1.0 completely changed the game, and for the better. More content, more nuance, more pals. And to top it off, the game released on sale with 30% off, making it an even better buy, on Steam anyways. So I purchased it for myself, and after playing a few dozen hours, I bought it for my wife and a lot of my friends and family. Doing my part for the indie scene, yay! And for better news, Pocketpair is kind of winning in the courts against Nintendo, shame! So they are granted operational continuity in their game for the most part, without a major corporate behemoth breathing down their necks. Maybe a small settlement comes forth soon, but who knows? This is a very good thing, as Nintendo has been very scummy in this aspect, I feel. So, you know what? Let's just get this out of the way and discuss the elephant in the room already. Nintendo's lawsuit against Pocketpair. Are there blatant influences of Pokemon characters in those of PALs? Yes, absolutely. Are they complete rip-offs so egregious to the point that the entire game and Pocketpair studio should be forced into bankruptcy? Or at the very least capitulation, which was Nintendo's obvious intention, as they were literally patenting key features of the game while the suit was ongoing? Hell no. So, for those not familiar, Nintendo went after Pocketpair and Palworld hard in court in an attempt to basically shut the entire thing down because their near monopoly on the creature capture gaming market was threatened. That's how I see it anyways. And they were right to be scared because as of writing this script, Palworld has a total of 658,000 gamers playing right now on Steam with an all-time peak of 2.1 million players and roughly 30.5 million copies sold. Whee, buddy, that makes me happy in pants. I mean, that's like at least $50 profit. And it's hard for me to sympathize with Nintendo when they were literally patenting frivolous game features during the suit, such as capture and riding mechanics. Yep, totally only something Pokemon does, am I right? Oddly enough, they never sued over plagiarism, which is funny. I mean, listen, I get Nintendo trying to protect their assets, but some of this is just straight up retarded. And I mean retarded in its utmost offensive sense. Now, I'm not a Pokemon fan, and Palworld is in fact the first creature capture game I've ever played. So from an outsider's objective viewpoint, I just don't see Palworld as trying to rip off Pokemon. To me, it feels like an homage, you know? It feels like the developers are actually fans of Pokemon. Thing is, by all accounts, Pokemon hasn't had any real good games for quite some time. As such, it seems that Pocketpair were simply filling a gap in the market that wanted the standard creature capture mechanic to be taken to the next level. Pokemon appears to have failed in that aspect. I mean, why would they even try when they pretty much controlled the vast majority of the market? Pokemon fans will probably buy anything they shovel out, so why spend extra resources trying to innovate and make better games? Well, Palworld jumped in and likely took those customers, and good for them. So get over it, Nintendo, and take Palworld's success and learn from it. Make better, more creative, and innovative Pokemon games. So yeah, that out of the way, Palworld is fucking great! I completely understand why people enjoy Pokemon and creature capture games now, as this was an absolute blast. For starters, I've put in 182 hours into this game since its 1.0 release, and that doesn't happen very often these days, I tell you what. I'm a 41-year-old boy with a wife and a 2-year-old daughter. I generally do not have time to put 180 hours into games in such a short amount of time. Actually, it was a bit less than that, as I would leave the game running while I was off eating dinner or doing other things, but minus all that, it was 150 hours of actual gameplay at least. But I wanted to do a video on Palworld and the game was so damn good, I just got sucked in. Luckily, I had a hiatus at my day job, and my awesome wife gave me some respite to focus on the game while she took care of the little demon. Only because of that am I able to bring this video to you. So everyone say, thank you, Mrs. Defiler. 182 hours in, and I still have a ton to do in the game. Content abound, my patient gaming friends. Now, I did complete the main quest line, I reached level 80, and I defeated all the major bosses and most of the regular bosses. However, there is still so much more to do. I haven't unlocked all the in-game craftable content, I haven't beaten a single raid boss, more on that later. I haven't even fully explored the world map or dungeons, as there is a ton. The bang for your buck here is insane, given the amount of content you get for $30, or the $23 that I paid for it when it was on sale. But I would have zero problem paying full price here. So all that said, what exactly is Palworld for those who haven't looked into it yet? Well, Palworld is a creature capture open world survival game where you run around capturing creatures called pals, use them in a variety of ways, explore the world that you're on, level up and unlock new craftable items, use your pals in combat and in your base, and progress into higher level areas, defeating bosses and collecting resources. Doesn't sound like anything special on the surface, but trust me, it's fairly unique. Upon first glance, it's fairly simple and can be beaten simply if you wish, but it's also very complex in some aspects and can be taken advantage of in that as well. It's almost like the developers give the players different options to play how they want. Weird. Granted, there are some instances where that's not the case, but we'll get into that in my criticism sections, believe that. For the most part, the gameplay loop involves you going around exploring the world, activating fast travel points, capturing pals by defeating them in combat, and then trapping them in spheres, not balls, spheres, when they're at low health. And you can even capture humans. Yay! Human slaves! Whee! You then build up a huge bank of pals that you can use for a variety of reasons, and these reasons can be pretty dark. This is like Pokemon for adults in some aspects. You can basically turn the pals into slaves, starve them, force them to work in horrible conditions, you can do surgeries on them to implant new stuff, you can meld them into more powerful pals like a pal blender, and you can breed them to lay powerful pal eggs that you can then exploit even further. Or you can just go the nice route, keep them happy and fed and working in nice conditions. Up to you, the player. Personally, I'm the kind of player that anthropomorphizes video game characters, so it feels bad for me to treat them like slaves and whatnot. I tend to enjoy more diplomatic and happy routes in my games, as I've had enough death and pain in real life. I mostly don't need them in my games. Mostly. So in my playthrough, I had a couple bases where all my pals were happy and just enjoying life while working for me, the man. And this, I believe, is where Palworld and Pokemon break apart. Feel free to correct me in the comments, but I think in Pokemon, you just use them to fight each other and that's it, right? Maybe you can ride them, I'm not sure. But in Palworld, the pals are completely different entities. They're tools, they're resources, they're combatants, they're workers, they're researchers and research assets. There's so much that they do in the game that they are paramount in progressing. You need pals to run your base and defend it against the occasional raid. They mine for you, cut down trees for you, research upgrades, build items, run equipment. They're mounts so you can ride or fly around the map. There is a plethora of things you use pals for, and it's awesome. They each have their own element type, just like in Pokemon, but they also each have their own work stats, such as mining, handiwork to use workbenches and build things, cooling and kindling to run refrigerators and cooking stations, electrical generation to give you base power, transporting to move around items in your base. There's so much that they do, and as you collect more, you find that some are optimal for some tasks, while others are better at other tasks or just combat, and it's loads of fun. There's so much depth involved in the PAL system, but it's never overwhelming or confusing despite being fairly complex because a lot of it is presented as options. For example, I beat the final questline and boss without ever dissecting or doing surgeries on pals. I never even used the vast majority of the game's arsenal and that of guns. I wanted to do a melee build this playthrough, so I mostly used the spear in my first 20 hours of the game or something, until I stumbled across Meowmere, a sword that shoots out rainbow-beamed kitties, and pretty much used that for the majority of the game until I reached a certain boss, where I was forced to use another ranged weapon and that of the godlike mechanical bow. But up until then, the spear was great. The combat isn't anything particularly impressive to write home about, but it was serviceable and still fun. And in my next playthrough, I'm going to try guns and see how that goes, so maybe they're more fun. I don't know, I'm just not super interested in using guns in a game like this for the most part. This scratches my fantasy itch more than my sci-fi itch. Having the pals use guns, on the other hand, that's a different story, as you can equip some of them with advanced weaponry, and it's hilarious. Now, the pacing of the game has you gradually discover all these mechanics over time to the point where you organically immerse yourself into the complexities, and before you know it, you're fluent in all of Palworld systems. And the devs did a fantastic job in that regard, as I never felt overwhelmed or anything like that. Granted, I did have to look up a couple things here and there, like where to find a specific type of ore or schematic for an item I wanted, but that was more due to me just not having much time to find these things out myself in game because, again, I did just one incomplete playthrough and that was 180 hours. And their survival guide in the game is very in-depth and loaded with nearly all the information you need to manage your time in Palworld's, well, world. The game is pretty good at communicating and providing information to the player. And man, the world is awesome. It doesn't feel dead and lifeless or boring. There are so many different unique biomes with all manner of different PAL types that exploring is just an absolute blast. In fact, that was probably the most fun parts I had in the game, just running around exploring and discovering new things with my pals. The way they made traversal throughout the world is awesome as well. You can climb virtually any surface with the limit being only your stamina. So if you see a huge mountain peak off in the distance, you can go there and just climb all the way to the top and then jump off and glide around. There are also these jump boost things scattered throughout terrain so you can more easily leap up to higher spots. The verticality of the map design is fantastic as it really encourages all manner of exploration. And on top of that, you have icy biomes, fiery lava biomes, grassy plains, cherry blossom forests, desert forests, and a bunch of biomes that are more like alien stuff, as well as the awesome sky island that's this floating pretty place with all these ancient looking structures. Then you have all these islands and points of interest out in the ocean. You'll just be running around the shore somewhere and then spot a silhouette off in the distance, or some spiny crag or an oil rig that just beckons you to hop on a water pal and check it out. There were so many instances of that really sucked me into the game's exploration, and it always paid off. Immersive sexiness. You also have these sanctuary sites that don't have fast travel points and are guarded by these powerful drones. These will hold some of the rarer pals and are very risky to explore, but the resources and pals you get from them are always worth the risk. And scattered throughout the world are a variety of dungeons and boss arenas that you'll stumble across as well. These are repeatable and will reset after a certain amount of time, and they're also fairly unique and fun. Sometimes the level design of the dungeons may be repeated, as I believe they are randomized from a pool of specific layouts, so I don't think they're procedurally generated, but the layout diversity is enough to keep things fresh, and the enemy types and bosses are randomized each run, so super fun. I have barely scratched the surface of the dungeons, as there is a ton, like I think over 130 or something like that, so yeah, even though I beat the last boss main questline, there is still so much more for me to explore. It's just, delicioso. Huge thumbs up to the world design team here, as it made for a most excellent escape. It's unique, interesting, and just an overall beautifully crafted world space. Absolutely love it. The art style and graphical fidelity are top-notch here, despite the somewhat cartoony aesthetic, which I generally don't care for in my games, to be honest, but here it grew on me. Bravo, Pocketpair. Speaking of variety and diversity, the PAL diversity is amazing. There are so many different types, and each one is so unique that you just genuinely want to go out and capture them all just to see what they do. You have some that are ultra powerful and others that are basic but still useful in the early game. I mean, hell, they even gave different petting animations for each one. That's insane. I found extracting their delicious essences to meld into more powerful pals was lots of fun, as you can just develop some pretty beefy pals that you can then use for combat or to work around your base. Each pal has their own passive skills for the most part, which grant them extra buffs or debuffs depending. Some have to do with working in base or gathering resources, while others benefit the party by granting buffs to the player or other pals. It's pretty sexy. You can bring up to 5 pals with you while exploring, but you can only have one out at a time to fight with you, use as a mount, or gather resources. With the exception of the Daydream here, whose passive allows it to hang out and shoot a dark projectile every now and then. I've kept her around since day one, as she was the first pal I used as a permanent party member that has been with me ever since, the little scamp. You also have this expedition feature where you can send an army of pals off into quests where they bring back a bunch of goodies for you. And there are a bunch of different expeditions to choose from that offer different rewards. As you can see here, there are still a lot I have yet to unlock despite having already beaten the main part of the game. So much bang for your buck. And it wouldn't be a survival game without the ability to adjust the world settings. This is very important for a tailored experience. You can adjust all manner of functions like pal damage, player damage, item weight limits, pal appearance rate, gathering rates, all manner of stuff. Personally, I didn't mess with the world settings until I was probably 50 hours in or so, opting to start my first playthrough on normal mode so I could get a taste of the game as the devs somewhat intended. Then after quite some time, I adjusted things like pal hunger rate and eventually pal and player damage when I was getting to the end game, not out of necessity, but simply due to time. It was just taking far too long for me to progress, and I needed to wrap the game up so I could start writing this script. But if I were doing just a normal playthrough and I had copious amounts of time to invest, I wouldn't feel the need to make most of those adjustments on my first playthrough. The game is balanced fine on default without tweaking things, I'd say. That said, the options are there for a custom experience, and in my future playthroughs, I will likely change things so the progression is simply faster overall. I just don't have the time. Now, as mentioned before, I think the pacing of Palworld is very well done, even if it can get a bit grindy in some aspects, but again, you can adjust a lot of that with the world settings. As far as your character goes though, the leveling is nicely achieved, I think. And when you increase your stats, it's very noticeable, so you actually feel like you're getting stronger with each level, because, well, you are. You level at a very good pace, and you can even just focus on that to a certain extent and level up rather fast. Granted, you can only get so far in the world with lower level armor and weapons, so you will still need to level your base and whatnot, but you can just go explore and discover new things for experience and level up quite a bit without even fighting pals. Capturing pals will give you tons of experience as well, as you get bonuses when you capture 5 of any given pal, but it still comes down to just options. If you want to focus on exploring, you can. If you want to focus on capturing pals, you can do that too. You also get experience just by crafting, mining, harvesting stuff, and fishing. You know, love me some fishing. So if you want to focus on just building your base and crafting all kinds of stuff, you can do that and level a decent amount as well. It's a great system in that it doesn't force you to do any one given thing at any time. It presents all these options, and you can decide which route you want to take and which goals you want to set for yourself. Naturally, it's probably optimal to do a hybrid run where you dabble here and there and everything, but again, options, options, options. You decide when and what you want to dabble in. It's great. Now, in regard to combat, it is a bit hit or miss for me. Like I said before, I wanted to do just a melee build, eventually transitioning to Meow Mirror and a bow, but melee doesn't feel the best overall. It's a bit clunky and weighty, but not in a good way. The swords felt slow for me, the spear animation and attack is a bit basic. Granted, the better the weapon, the better it feels. Higher tier weapons feel way better to use, but ranged attacks just feel much better overall, I think. The bow and Meow Mirror were far more enjoyable to use than a spear in my opinion, and that kind of sucks. You're also somewhat limited in what you can do as a player, in that you just have a dodge and that's pretty much it. There's not much else you can do, as your pals will be doing most of the work, but I guess that's the nature of creature capture games. I really can't say, as I just don't have the experience with them, so maybe you guys can inform me on that in the comments. Now, all that said, the attacks and mechanics of the pals is what makes combat so interesting and fun. Each pal will have a variety of different builds that mix up combat quite a bit. And when building your pal party or pal army, you can even customize these and adjust them with new abilities so you can make the ultimate pal warriors. As stated before, each pal has an elemental type such as grass, fire, dark, ice, and more. These will each have a counter that you can utilize to your advantage, so bringing specific elemental pals to specific fights will be very beneficial and make things go easier. But you don't have to do that. Pals are not immune to any elemental type. They may just have a 50% resistance to it, so the damage from their elemental type will be less. So you'll never really have to worry about not doing damage in a fight is what I'm saying, but pals will be immune to elemental hazards of their elemental type and counters. For example, fire pals are immune to burning and freezing, ice pals are also immune to freezing, water pals can't drown, electrical pals can't be electrified or paralyzed, things like that. It makes for a fun combat system and overshadows the somewhat lackluster mechanics of the player character, but you can mix things up for yourself in combat by riding your pals and using their abilities and whatnot. I found this to be less fun personally. I prefer to fight on the ground and let my pal do his thing so I can flank and split focus of the pal we're attacking, but others might prefer mounted combat, so each to their own kind of thing, you know? Both work just fine. As you can see, there's a running theme here in my praise of Palworld, that of player agency. Palworld grants the player so many options to play the game as they wish. You're never pigeonholed into doing a specific thing at any given time. You can progress as you wish in any manner of your choosing. This is a huge plus and really wraps up the gameplay loop nicely. But it's not all sunshine kisses and kitten gizzards. Palworld has a few things that I found wanting, so let's provide some feedback and discuss my criticisms. Dun, 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 dun. There are quite a few graphical bugs and performance issues at times. When in base and your pals are doing their thing, they will often be doing work animations, but nowhere near the station they're actually working on. This is funny at first, as you'll see a pal mining like nothing in midair, but it gets old after a while and can become a bit irritating, as they will often be in the way, or sometimes you'll be looking for them and they won't be in their designated work site. In regard to the performance issues, this would mostly happen in base, but when I have like 20 plus pals running around doing their tasks, the frame rate would randomly drop to single digits. It was inconsistent and happened rarely, but when it does, it's obviously very noticeable and makes you give out one of them Ben Affleck holding a cigarette sighs, you know, just like, but it wouldn't happen every time I was in base, just on occasion, so I couldn't pinpoint what may be causing it. Not a huge deal, but it shouldn't happen at all, let's be fair. Other than that, I didn't really have much performance issues. The game ran smoothly for the most part. Occasional frame rate hiccup here and there, but for the most part, like I said, smooth. There's also an issue with the pop-up text from events like defeating bosses for the first time that cover most of the screen and block a lot of the UI. This is a bit annoying, and I feel they could have done a better job as it does get in the way, especially if you're still fighting other pals in the process. As noted before, I think combat is a bit lackluster from the player's perspective, but this could just be my issue as I didn't build a single gun and just focused on melee and my cute little meow mirror for the most part until being forced to use the mechanical boo. And that in and of itself is a problem. This might be considered a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear about a major boss event, then feel free to skip ahead like 60 seconds or something, but in the main quest line, you're gated to entering the final zone of the world tree by this huge whale boss called Panthalis. What a fatty. Once you beat him, you gain access to the world tree and all the awesomeness it has to offer. The problem is, up until that point, I was only using spears and meow mirror. I even had the strongest spear in the game called Lily's Enhanced Spear, but you cannot fight Panthalis in melee. It's quite nearly impossible because he mostly stays off in the distance and uses ranged attacks, and you can't go out to him because he's in the water, so you'll just be swimming around unable to attack like a moron. This means you're pretty much forced to use a high damage range weapon, and even most of your pals can't touch Panthalis because they'll just run out there trying to hit him but instead be stuck swimming around. Again, like a moron. Flying electrical mounts are helpful here, but it's still best to just use a ranged weapon because melee and most pals can't really outdamage his 10-minute timer, and more on that later. Timers. Ugh. So as a result of this, all that player agency you're used to throughout your entire playthrough gets completely thrown out the window as you're forced to adopt a specific playstyle to beat this one boss. As such, I had to spend a couple hours just building all this crafting stuff so I could finally make the most powerful bow in the game to take him out, as the ranged weapons just completely dwarf the spear and melee weapons by, like, a lot. The laser sword is pretty good and has faster attack than most melee weapons, but the damage still isn't anywhere near that of the mechanical bow. This kinda sucked. I could have used a weaker ranged weapon, I suppose, but given the boss's health pool and timer, I didn't bother because it would likely take forever to kill him. Going through the whole game, being able to play how you wish just to be forced into a certain playstyle for that gatekeeping boss was rather off-putting, not gonna lie. I wasn't too thrilled, unfortunately. But once you get past him, then you can go back to doing your normal spiel, so it's not a huge deal, I suppose, but I did feel like it forced me to waste time making things I just didn't want to make or use in order to defeat him. And that brings up my next criticism. Boss timers. I fucking hate boss timers. I hate timers in general in my games. It's one of the main reasons I don't enjoy racing games. In Palworld, the major bosses all have timers of around 5 to 10 minutes depending. So don't kill the boss within that time and you just automatically die. Poof, game over, so sorry. This sucks the land of 1,000 assholes. If I want to take 20 minutes fighting a boss, duking it out with gritted teeth and clenched sphincter, I should be able to. I get that it's a gear check and all that, but why do we need a gear check in this sort of game? I was playing single player on my own world by myself. I don't need to have gear checks. Winning a fight against a boss through sheer will and patience would be an epic experience, but the game robs you of that. So strange given how the rest of it is so drenched in player agency, and you can't change any of those settings in the world setting options. It's just disappointing. Well. But another major issue I had with combat is that you can't line of sight enemies. They will simply shoot straight through obstacles like nothing, so all you can really do is rely on your dodge. Ew. There are some other quality of life issues that can't be adjusted in the world settings as well that I just found a bit irritating. For one, food spoiling. This is a major annoyance I had, and you can't fix it without mods. Food just rots way too fast in my opinion. I would put my character to work on mining in my base while I go make dinner for the family and whatnot, just to get back and have her be starving and like half the animals in the base, or the pals in the base rather, be starving because all the food vanished due to the expiration timer. Granted, some food has higher timers for spoiling, but it's still annoying because the best quality ones that grant buffs have some of the lowest timers of like 15 to 20 minutes. That just sucks. And you can build refrigerators and chilled pal feeding baskets, but then you have to have a chilling pal assigned to them 24/7 because as soon as they leave, the cooling effect vanishes. So you have a wasted pal slot in your base, basically. Wish they'd just allow you to adjust the food spoiling timer, or at least make it so the cooling pal didn't have to just sit on the cooling unit all the time. They could make it so they just zap it with cold that will last for like an hour and then come back and zap it again or something so they can go off and do other tasks, but that's not how it is. Super annoying. Now in the research lab, you can improve the rate at which food spoils in the cooling storages, but it still doesn't feel like it's enough, You still have to have the cooling pal there. I just wish you could adjust it in the world settings is all I'm saying here, Boo, whiny crybaby Jarek. Speaking of pals cooling though, there are a few odd things that pals do when working at times. Sometimes they'll just jump on a workbench or task for about 5 seconds and then run off to do something else. I'm thinking it may have something to do with the priority settings you have set in your base, but it's inconsistent and confusing. It seems to happen at random. Not a huge deal, I guess, though, but it's there. Still a criticism. And when it comes to bases overall, I like this part of the game, but I wish the base building area of the bases could be a bit bigger. If you're somewhat familiar with my channel, you'll know that base building in games is one of my favorite things to do, and Palworld's building areas are rather small. So to remedy this, you have to build vertically, which is fine, I guess, but going up 6 to 7 stories over and over to do certain things can be a major pain in the long run. That said, you can get creative and build some fairly neat structures, but the support system they have for it makes things a bit iffy. You have to have these beams in place for support in order to build other things on top of it, other stories and branching out roofs, so you can't get too crazy with it. And personally, I prefer to be able to get crazy with my building when it comes to base buildings. I like to build crazy stuff whenever I want, however I want, without having to worry about support structures, but them's the breaks. There's also an issue when it comes to the pals in your base in that they will randomly get ailments and depressed moods, but the game doesn't tell you why. All your other working pals can be completely fine, but one will randomly get pissy or get a fracture or something, and you have no way of telling why that happens or how to prevent it. So that gets a bit annoying at times, but it doesn't happen too often in fairness. I guess it's just a random event, maybe scripted event kind of thing, but I have no idea. The game doesn't tell you. Now, in regard to the grindiness of the game, you can summon raid bosses either in your base or in an arena, and I have yet to defeat one. Despite bringing an army of their counters, most of which are higher level than the boss, they still just wipe my team like nothing. So you have to grind and grind to try and build up a sizable army of specific pals that can go up against the raid boss. The problem is, I just don't have the time to do that. This brings me to one of my biggest criticisms, the grind. Palworld has some mechanics that simply take far too long to complete for your older gamers like yours truly. For instance, I have some really high level pals where they have level 10 handiwork, which is the max they can get, and even in these instances, there will be items you have to build that take literal minutes, like 5 to 10 real world minutes, even with the handiwork research maxed out. It's insane. My next playthroughs will be modded to shit, I tell you what, but this playthrough I used no mods up until a certain point. I was forced to install the keep working when alt-tabbed mod so that I could downsize when my character was doing menial tasks that take forever. Why this isn't in the game by default, I have no idea, but whenever you try to downsize while mining or working at a crafting station or the like, the game will stop your character from working. It's stupid as hell. I don't know why they do that. And sure, you can go off and do your own thing while they work on stuff in your base, the pals that is, but in the end game, a lot of times you may only need one specific item to do something like the aforementioned bow I had to build, and so you kind of just have to wait around while they build it. This is all just to make the grind harder, I guess, and this is brutal in the early to mid game as well because you have to assist in building most of the time. So there will be instances of you just sitting there staring at the screen while your character builds items for literal minutes, and minutes is an eternity in the gamer sphere. It feels like they're trying to just pad numbers or something. I don't see why it needs to take a year to build some items. The difficulty should be in acquiring the resources to build them, not the actual build time itself. And this is compounded by how difficult it can be to manually set a pal to task. When in your base, you can pick up pals and assign them to certain tasks so they focus only on that. But a lot of times it doesn't register where you're trying to place them. She's strong. But whenever you set them down, if the task doesn't stick, they just run off to do something else and you have to chase after them to try and set their task again. It's a huge pain in the ass and wastes a lot of time, and it happens quite a bit. You also can't pick them up when they're sleeping in a bed, which is weird. Now, all that said, you can adjust some things in the world settings to cut down on the grind, and there's so much to do in the game and to grind for that it's more a plus than negative, as there is a plethora of content to work towards, and from what I've played, it's all fun. But if you're like me and have a family and day job and whatnot, the grind can be a bit much, particularly when it comes to the time it takes to just craft stuff. So, more a warning than an outright criticism here, I guess. I mean, it is a criticism, but it's just too much, you guys. Too much grind. Another thing that is a pain is when you set a furnace or cooking station to build ingots or fancy foods and whatnot, you can't simply add more resources to the process once it's started. You have to stop the current job, remove all the resources, pick them up, and then restart the job with more ore. Just very unnecessary, methinks. And one last major issue I have with the base mechanics is that there is no shared stash option between your bases outside of the limited guild storage. This requires you having to fast travel back and forth between bases multiple times when trying to build higher tier items because your resources will be scattered throughout them all. The guild storage allows you to access items in any base, but as I said, it's limited, and I personally strictly used it for food and ingredients because they don't spoil in the guild storage. Yeah, I hate that food spoiling. A universal storage system would be a super awesome addition to the game. It could be a mid-game storage or item, or something that just grants access to all materials in all your bases. I don't know, but it's desperately needed. This would cut down on so much needless bouncing around between bases and wasting your precious, juicy time. Now, there are a few bugs here and there as well in Palworld, such as spheres passing through enemies when you throw them, the animation bugs mentioned earlier, or sometimes when you auto-deposit items in your base, it will deposit your gold coins that shouldn't be deposited. The way this works is you open up your inventory, and on PC anyways, press R, and it brings up an auto deposit screen, but it should only deposit items that are already in your storage units that's in your base. So sometimes it will randomly deposit my gold coins that are not in any chests, and having no idea it did that, I would go to buy something just to find out I have no money on me. I then will have to track down where my gold was by scouring every chest I have in my base to find where the system randomly placed them. It's just weird, man. And speaking of spheres, the little devices that are used to capture pals, whenever you throw them and miss, they just vanish into the ether, forever gone, never to be seen again. And I friggin' hate this, especially when they're super high-end ones that are really super pricey to make. They just disappear, and I think it would be far more beneficial to the player if they would just land on the ground somewhere behind the pal that you're trying to hit and just allow you to pick them up later. That would be really helpful, because them just disappearing is super annoying. But yeah, that's all my criticisms thus far, at least the major ones, so don't let it sway you too sharply, because the pros far outweigh the cons in Palworld. There is so much to love about this game, and now I completely understand why people enjoy the Pokemon franchise and the creature capture genre as a whole. I didn't even get into some of the other details like the PvP arena, the in-depth breeding and pal awakening mechanics, hard mode bosses, and much more. Yeah, there's so much more I could cover here, but I just wanted to go over the main mechanics and whatnot. Hopefully this will give those of you on the fence a proper understanding of what Palworld entails. As for me, I was instantly hooked, as Palworld throws you into the gameplay right at the start and never lets up. This feels like a game made by gamers for gamers, particularly those Pokemon fans that feel their beloved franchise has been severely lacking as of late. I, for one, am glad to have joined the bandwagon of creature capture games, and am looking forward to see where Palworld goes from here, because I absolutely loved my time with this game thus far. So yeah, Palworld, f***ing fantastic. This has been Jarek Defiler. Thanks for watching my rather lengthy video, and please subscribe, like the video, share it all over social media and all that. And you all have a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night, depending on where you are. And go enslave some pals. Yeah, human pals.